here today with Pamela Stockwell. Pamela, say hi.
Hi, everybody.
And this is a huge episode for us. If you heard the last episode that Ashley and I did back in June, we talked about how our first episode of the fall season here, the end of 2022 season, would be our 100th episode. And we really wanted to have someone special on for our 100th episode. And so we actually spent quite a while talking about this. And we talked about, well, we could go for like a big author or a big name or somebody everybody's heard of. And then I thought about it and I thought, what I'm trying to represent here in the podcast is the best of women's fiction. And that is about the writing and it's about the books, but it's also more about the people and how we support each other as a community in the women's fiction writer world. And I thought, okay, there is no better example of this, both a great writer, but talk about stepping up for the community than Pamela. And so I'm going to let you explain why I know that to be true. And before we get into your book, which is fabulous, I want to have you tell people a little bit about your kidney donation story, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, no problem. During the pandemic, we started, the Women's Fiction Writers Association started doing these Zoom write-ins. And I got to know a woman on there named Kelly. And gradually, because, we're spending time writing, not talking so much, but gradually I started hearing that she had a kidney disease and was trying to get on the kidney transplant list. And I felt very bad for her, but I never thought about giving her a kidney, actually. But one day I was driving to South Carolina with my daughter, and she was driving, and I was bored. So I started going through Facebook, and Kelly had posted a plea for a kidney and had the link to her hospital's form that you could fill out if you're interested. And I thought, why not? There's no way. And apparently there was a way. And I kept it. They have a huge vetting process you have to go through. And I was very surprised every time I passed a medical test or, the interview with a social worker or this or that. And I just kept moving along in the process. And the next thing I know, we're having surgery and she has a new kidney.
And talk about like being there for each other, right? I mean, Kelly is walking around with your kidney in her body in Southern California right now. And you guys met.
I'm in New Jersey and she's in California and we haven't met yet. So.
Which is just mind-blowing. And so that's why I wanted to have you on, in addition to your fabulous book that we're going to talk about. But I just felt like you represent everything in terms of how we build these tight connections. And yeah, we might be writers together, but we're also humans together. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I am in so much admiration. And let's do something fun for this episode. Let's give away a copy of your novel, A Boundless Place. And for anyone who enters that giveaway, we'll put the link on the page on the website with the episode, put it in social media too. I'll donate $1 for everybody who enters that giveaway, and we'll get some money that we'll raise some money for. I think you said kidney.org is the best one?
Kidney.org, yeah.
Perfect. Let's do that. So everybody, you can have a chance to win Pamela's fabulous novel and raise some money for charity here. So let's do it. So let's talk about the book, because I'm going to start by telling you that I always go read the reviews of the books that are on the podcast. And I look for what are the most common words that come up on a book. And it's really interesting to me after the conversation we just had. Let me tell you the top 5 or 6 words that come up for your book. Heartfelt, heartwarming, all about the characters, hopeful, uplifting, feel good. There's a lot of consistency to those words. People love this book. It makes them feel gooey and happy inside is what I take away from that. And so tell us about this story that is making everybody feel gooey and happy inside. Tell us more about it.
Well, it's funny because this is my first book and I was 58 when it came out last year. And I always thought I'd write. And I always thought I'd write like John Steinbeck or, something very deep. And not that this doesn't have depth. But I found that my real voice, I wrote like a more literary, if you will, novel that's in my drawer. And it may come out one day if I rework it. But I found that my voice actually is more, I like to have a lot of humor. I like to make you laugh and cry. So hopefully people will do that with this. And it is a very feel-good novel. And so I get a lot of feedback, even not in the reviews, that people keep telling me the same thing. And like, they liked my characters and they really stayed with them for a long time. And
so it's set back in the 1960s and 70s, right? And it's on 1969. That's right. I got right on the border. And it's one street. Like, tell us a little bit about the story of what happens in this book.
Well, so the main character is Violet, and she is reeling from grief. And she moves to this neighborhood. She thinks to heal, to get away from the memories and everything from where she came from. But what she really is doing is hiding. And she tries to avoid the neighbors, thinking she just needs time to herself. But the quirky neighbors draw her into their lives, with the help mostly of Arabella, who's a 7-year-old girl who lives across the street. And it's, I was worried a lot of younger people would find it very odd that my 7-year-old character would go over to the neighbor's house and just hang out. But it was a 69, and we used to run around the neighborhood and never tell our
Yeah,
parents where we were. So
totally. And that's a really interesting point, that this little girl plays like such a big role in the book. Like, what made you decide to do that, to lead with like a small child character as like bringing everybody else together?
it actually sprang from a whole different idea. So the whole neighborhood is based on my neighborhood, except we weren't quite as friendly. But I made it a little rosier. But I lived on a dirt road in a trailer park neighborhood, and we were across from an Air Force base, which this neighborhood is also. And my idea at first was to have this 7-year-old girl, who would meet the people who moved in across the way, which is actually kind of what happened to me. The house across the street was always changing owners, like every year or two. And I thought it would be interesting if she would learn something from each person that moved in there. So I started writing that, and Violet was the first person I put in there. And I liked her. I couldn't move her back out, so she stayed. And so my other ideas for characters just became the rest of the neighborhood. And so there's an
Isn't that
older,
interesting?
yeah, cranky, pushy woman who you end up liking, hopefully, and a cranky man who has a heart of gold, and stuff like that. So, and they all end up needing something from each other and giving to each other.
I love how like our books start with the germ of an idea, and then you think you're going to write it a certain way, and as you start working with it, it ends up, to your point, like, oh, I like this character, that's working, and it ends up
Yeah,
different. I'm going through that with my current book that I'm working on, which started out as more of a thriller and ended up like I dropped the crime and I dropped all the bad stuff, and it's back to women's fiction. So yeah, we're just drawn to what we're drawn to, I guess.
yep. Can't fight it.
Can't fight it.
Not that we can't
So
branch out, but
So talk to me a little bit about how a book like this changed, right? Like you say, it's built, it's all around one street. You've got this neighborhood. It's got some really interesting things going on in the history element of what's happening at the same time in 1969. Like, did it have to change a lot as you were editing it, or did it stay pretty pure to the first
it,
versions?
it was very long. So it was 125,000 words for those of you who are watching who may not be writers. A really long mainstream type book is probably about 80 to 100,000. So I hired a professional editor, and she gave me wonderful advice, and I ended up taking out some backstory chapters, and so there was a lot of things deleted, and but it did make for a better story. So you end up, you didn't need all the backstory. You have little hints, it's enough.
And
We
how did you
we
know,
like
like,
throw everything in there.
right? Yes, me too. How did you know which historical events were going to feature in the book and were important, and which ones were kind of like, I don't need to spend so much time on that?
Well, the biggest event of the year, of the decade, of the century, maybe, was the moon landing, and so it was kind of and I remember it from, I was 6 years old at the time. I'm not Arabella, by the way, but I was 6 years old at the time, and I do have very strong memories of watching that and being fascinated by the space program and all that stuff. So I can remember it being a hot July night, so it stuck out in my memory.
Well, I'm going to read a quick review. I always like to read another writer talking about a book, just so people can get a sense of it. And this is from Virginia McCullough, who's the author of Island Healing. And I love how she picks up the same word that's in all your reviews. She says, Stockwell's writing is heartfelt and touching, but her character's antics also had me laughing out loud. In the end, this late 60s and early 70s slice of life story is all about our need for human connection. The characters will stay with me for a very long time. Doesn't that sum it up just lovely?
Yes. I like it when they get it.
Yeah, yeah. So this is your debut, and you had some level of editing you had to do with it. Like, what did you learn through the process? Is there anything that you would share as advice for writers as you went through this process of writing? Like you say, it wasn't your first book, but it was your debut
Yeah.
novel that came out into the world.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing you have to accept, is that your first effort may not be the effort that makes it. But it's all a learning process. But the second really big thing for me was uh, actually making time. I actually wrote in my calendar when I decided to get serious about trying to produce a novel and get it out in the world. I'm a stay-at-home mom, or I was. I have a job now, but I spent all my time driving kids around and doing all that stuff. So I set around 2 hours in the morning every weekday morning and would make myself sit down and write, edit, or even if I'm reading a craft book about, how to improve your writing, something that had to do with writing. And that really helped, is just to have that dedicated time and not try to squeeze it in here and squeeze it in there.
So I love that advice. That is great writing advice. And yeah, that I hear that again and again from authors, this idea of like prioritize and carve out that time and take it as seriously or more seriously
Yeah.
than anything else on your calendar. And yeah, because otherwise, like even training people, training sounds horrible, but getting the people around you to understand that that is important to you and that that doesn't become time that they can just grab you for something
Yeah.
else instead. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true.
So let's talk food, because we are starting something fun with this 100th episode. We are starting a collaboration with Book Club Bites, which is this really cool website for book clubs. If you haven't checked it out, go to bookclubbites.com. And what's really interesting is on that site, Mallory Barnes, who runs it, she's also a women's fiction writer. She creates recipes. She actually replicates them, puts photos up, and creates a whole recipe so that a book club can create something to go with the book if they want to when they're having their book club meeting, which is really fun because we all know that book clubs and wine and food go together, right? And so she asked you for a recipe, and I know there's a post that we'll put the link to also that it's got a recipe for dumplings, is it? Can you tell me a little bit more about
Chicken
these
and dumplings, which
dumplings?
was my absolute favorite food growing up. It's just a comfort food. Don't put it on your diet because it's not there. It's not there for that. But it was a recipe that my mom used to make that her mother-in-law taught her. So I had to really rack my brain about how to make it because I haven't made it in a while because of the health factor. But it's delicious, and I want to make it now.
And how did it end up in the book? Why did that end up in this book?
Violet is making it for someone special for a special evening. That kind of goes wrong. So
Oh
yeah,
no. Okay.
yeah. But
And you've probably done some book clubs or had some questions from readers by now. Is there anything that surprised you or delighted you in the feedback about the book?
actually, when they start talking about the deeper things about the characters, I'm like, yes, you get it. So it's really fun. And the first time I talked to a book club, I was on Zoom and I was very nervous about it, but it was just fun. So, um, and weird to talk because I belong to several book clubs, and to talk about my book in a book club was kind of strange. But I feel like people really um, understood the characters and their motivations, and uh, it's just good to hear that they liked it and they liked the characters. I remember my husband telling me, that's my husband, but he really meant it. He doesn't read women's fiction. If he's going to read, he'll usually read like a thriller, or he loves The Martian. Um, so he read my book though, and he's told me, he's like, a month later, he's like, the other day I was just wondering what Violet was up to. Like, she was a real person. And I was like, the highest compliment.
Oh yeah, you created like a real character that stuck.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Interestingly, they've done all these studies that show that the circuits in our brain that connect when we're reading are actually the same as the circuits that connect when we're meeting someone in real life. So
Oh,
when we
wow.
meet a character in a book, if the author does it right, like you did, it's actually not dissimilar, the process that's happening in our brains. It does feel like we met a real person, and it is actually the same way our networks work in our brains as if we had met a real person.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So, talking of great books and characters, do you have anything to recommend for us? Can you recommend any books that you've enjoyed?
My favorite author of right now is Frederick Backman. I just love him. I love the way his characters are very complex, and he just peels the layer after layer off as the book goes on. And he's got a new one coming out in October, so I'm already have it's on pre-sale, and it's called The Winners. This year, one of my favorite books that I've read is not at all like my writing. I think I like to compare myself to Frederick Bachman. Um, but I read The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr., and that is more like Maya Angelou meets Roots by Alex Haley. It's about gay slaves, actually, so it's a very different take, but it's heartbreaking. It really is just bold and out there and sad, but it was a wonderfully written book. So
Awesome. I will put the links to both of those in the show notes. There's an episode page on the website at bestofwomensfiction.com, and you'll be able to find all of Pamela's social media, the books, and the giveaway that we talked about earlier, and the recipe for chicken dumplings,
There you go.
most importantly. So is there anything I haven't asked you that you particularly like to talk about when you're on interviews?
My next book.
Yeah, tell us about it. I never like to put people on the spot unless they're ready to talk about the next
Yeah,
one.
oh yeah, I'm ready. I'm not that it's ready, but I just got the edits back from an editor, and so I'm working on that. And the nice thing is, see, I still couldn't let go of my characters, so it's still set in the same street, but I have two new characters who move in, and there are two women who they meet accidentally, actually, but they have both just done something that has blown up their lives. And this is set in 1972, so it's a couple of years later, but it's about women finding their voice at a time when, especially in South Carolina, they didn't really have that option. They were expected to go into this mold or that mold. And it's about them trying to help each other to find out, what their life's going to be like. And some of the characters pop up in there again that you met in A Boundless Place. So I'm hoping next year it'll come out. So
23, I hope so. Oh, that sounds fabulous. It also sounds like my kind of thing. I love books about women's voices and finding your voice. So awesome. Well, where do you like to hang out on social media? Where can people find you, or where should they follow you? Like, what's the best way?
Probably Facebook and Instagram. I found Twitter is more for writers. I actually listened to one of your podcasts and somebody said that. And Instagram is more for readers. And and I also hang out on Facebook just to keep in touch with everybody that I know and update them and post funny cat pictures because I have a funny cat. So
perfect. Funny cat pictures are the most popular thing on Instagram, other than funny dog pictures. So
that's true.
awesome. Well, it has been so fun to have a chance to talk with you. And thank you for accepting my invitation to come on and be our 100th episode. You totally made my day, week, month here. So thank you.
So happy to be here.
And I'll encourage folks, go read the book. It's got such fabulous reviews. Everybody loves it. Heartwarming, heartfelt, uplifting, hopeful. What more can we want? Going back to like the crazy work school is back and everything's getting nuts season, than an escapist, heartwarming, uplifting book.
There you go. Thank you, Lainey.
Thanks for joining me.